Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you guys for being here. I hope you guys are doing well. My throat is a little itchy today. Not a little, really itchy. Because I've been out there in the yard doing yard work. I'm trying to get my flower beds and my garden ready for spring and summer. I feel like where I live it's already summer because it's so hot and humid. But then the weather's been very unpredictable. That's why a lot of people are getting sick, with cold and allergies. It was so hot yesterday, and then the next day it starts raining, and then the day after that it gets cold. So a lot of people are getting sick. So that was the weather report. All right. So how it's like where you live? Is it still, snowing? Anyway, so let's talk about this topic that I'd like to talk about today. So a couple of people have left some similar type of comments on some of my videos. Sorry. It's not the first time I've heard of this um, statement or topic before. In fact, I saw another YouTuber talk about this on his channel. Can't remember which one exactly. I'm sorry. All right. So a gentleman left a comment on one of my videos saying, don't bring your Filipina to the US. It is not a good idea to bring a Filipina to the West. You will regret it. So every time I see statements or I hear people saying this, three questions come to my mind. The first one, should you bring your Filipina to the US? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? So let's answer the first one really quick. Should you bring your Filipina to the US? With that question, that's completely up to you, because at the end of the day, your Filipina will not be able to come to the US unless you decide to petition her, because whether that's a fiancé visa or a spouse visa, you're going to have to initiate that process on her behalf. So if you don't do that, if you decide not to do that, and if you decide as a couple, you want to settle in the Philippines, then that's completely up to you. That is your choice. Whew, my throat. Okay, so is it a good idea to bring a Filipino to the US? Now, this depends on the situation. Everybody's situation is different. For my husband and I, we met 2 decades ago. We were on our early 20s. It made more sense for him to bring me here to the US because my adjustment wouldn't have that big of an impact to us as a couple, because now you're going to have to think as a team, not just one person. It would have been much more difficult or much more challenging for him to leave everything behind here and then start over in the Philippines. And, it made more sense for him to bring me here. And for a lot of couples, it will all come down to those major factors that will have a big impact on your lives together, because now, you're a team, you're starting a life together. For a lot of people, it comes down to finances. How are you going to support yourselves, together as a couple? For a lot of foreigners, getting a job or finding a job in the Philippines is very difficult, especially back in the days. Nowadays, I feel, happy for those couple who are able to settle in the Philippines at a younger age, because there's more remote jobs, remote work, from e-commerce to tech jobs. Back in the day, there's no such thing really. A lot of foreigners that I've seen that were a little bit younger settling in the Philippines with their spouses usually started some type of business. And that is a very, at least in my opinion, difficult endeavor for a lot of foreigners in the Philippines. But I've seen that a lot of foreigners who give this advice are usually retired. And for that situation, in that situation, it makes sense, if you're already retired, whether you're getting social security or, the military, what else? Any type of private type of retirement, it makes sense because your money will definitely go further in the Philippines. It's worth more in the Philippines. So it wouldn't be so hard to start a family there, even with children. You'll be able to live comfortably with that kind of income in the Philippines, especially if you decide to live in the provinces. Now, that's not everybody's situation. So again, if that is your situation, you have that stable income coming in every month where you don't really even have to worry about your wife having to go to work, then that's a good thing. I'm happy for those couples who are able to do that. You settle in the Philippines. Why not? That's actually a really good scenario, a good situation to be in. But that's not everybody's situation. For a lot of foreigners who are young, like us, back in the day, that was our situation. I mean, it wasn't even an option because again, how are we going to support ourselves? So Yeah, it depends on the situation. Now, is it a bad idea to bring your Filipino to the US? Now, whenever I see this kind of statements, I think, and this is my opinion, okay, I think people find it to be a bad idea because there are existing concerns. There are already existing concerns. So, three major concerns that I see people talk about, or I hear people talk about, is the first one. If you bring a Filipina to the US, she's going to become westernized because there's going to be a lot of Western influence. Now, is that true? Well, yes, of course. She's going to come here. She's going to get the first-hand exposure to the Western culture, especially if she decides to, like, establish a career. She's going to be out of the home at least 10 hours a day. She's going to be out there, dealing with the world. That's life sometimes. You're going to have to deal with that. But there's going to be an exposure. Now, here's the thing. Nowadays, with social media, she doesn't even really need to leave the Philippines to have that kind of Western exposure because the Philippines is very westernized. So it doesn't matter where you live in the Philippines, unless, of course, you live very remote and off the grid. But as long as you have a phone now, you're gonna have some type of Western exposure. Now, I do understand the concern because yes, obviously here in the US, there's going to be the first-hand exposure. But let's be honest, sometimes it all comes down to the type of home life you have and the lifestyle you have. Now, here in the US, you can live here in the US and have a very traditional life. I've seen, at least where I live, a lot of people are choosing to live farther from, they try to at least have that very traditional home life. A lot of people are homesteading, living off the grid. Some people, don't even have internet connection. So, it depends on the type of lifestyle you have. You could live in the Philippines and live a very westernized lifestyle. I've seen a lot of, interracial couples, Filipino-American couples have that kind of lifestyle. They live in the provinces of the Philippines, but they live a very westernized kind of life. So it will all come down on the type of life you're going to have, home life specifically. So yes, I understand the concern. There's going to be that exposure to the Western culture. And we know that it's not a lot of it, actually, to be very honest. There's a lot of bad influence. But that will all come down to the type of, moral character that person have. Because again, you can't really completely get rid of the exposure. It doesn't matter where you live. But yeah, I do understand. I understand why there is a concern. Obviously, if you shelled, is that a word? I'm gonna put it in the screen. I can't say it. The Bisaya in me is coming out. But anyways, if you try to shield yourself from that kind of exposure, I mean, it helps, but you can't completely get rid of it. Especially if she comes here and she decides to establish a career. Some people have this concern of, oh, if she's exposed to that kind of culture, she's going to change. That is the second concern. She's going to change, For some, and I've seen this before. I mean, let's be honest. Some women, you get exposed to that kind of culture, you all of a sudden realize, oh, I have so much more options now. I have a job, I can make my own money, and then that introduction to that feminist type of exposure where I'm so independent now, I don't need this man anymore, I can do it on my own. I think that's another concern. And then the third concern, I should say, is the fact that if she goes through that, the exposure, the change, not a good change, a negative change, she's gonna leave, she's gonna find someone else. Now, those are very valid concern because I've seen maybe one or two people that actually did exactly that. But at least people that I know personally, I mean, I have another, maybe five other friends, five or six friends who are married to, foreigners. Some of them are married for 5 years, some are 15, 14. And one friend, actually a close friend, just celebrated her 30th wedding anniversary. So I think, to conclude, it will all come down to the type of person you choose. Finding that person who shares the same core values with you. The fundamentals is very important. That's why it's very important to get to know that person. So it doesn't matter where you decide to settle. The key is to find a person who's going to be committed to you, the person who married you because they love you, and the person who's going to stay with you for better or for worse. it doesn't matter the situation, it doesn't matter where you decide to settle. Because again, this is my opinion, I think there is a lot of fear, because I've noticed that not everyone, but a lot of times I notice that the guys that are so scared about this, taking the Filipina to the US, are those who have this big age gap with their Filipina. Because there's this mindset that, there's this thinking that, oh, if I bring her to the US, she's gonna find out she's got more options there and she's gonna most likely leave. Well, that's not a good thing, because if you already have that kind of concern in your head, well, the possibility of that happening, that's very likely to happen. So instead of worrying about that, how about finding a person who loves you, a person who's committed to you, and a person who will stay with you for better or for worse, and a person who shares your core values, those fundamental values that you care about. Because the situation can always change, but you want a person who's gonna stay with you regardless of the change. All right, those are my opinions. I hope you learned something from the video. I see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.